There are countless Space Marine chapters in the grim and distant future of Warhammer 40k. And while it's fair to say that some are objectively cooler than others, everyone knows and honors the sagas of the first founding chapters, the ancient, legendary legions that started it all. But today, we're not here to talk about them. Welcome to Unknown Founding, a series where I'll show you that the defenders of the Imperium aren't just space wolves, Imperial fists, or Dark Angels. They say the shining armor of the Knights of Aldebaran represents the Emperor's light, though some claim it actually reflects the light of Aldebaran itself, the brightest star in their home sector. If you want to paint a Space Marine army fast, metallic armor is an incredible shortcut. Start with a bright, even base coat of your favorite silver tone, and you're already halfway there. For a bit more depth, you can add some soft airbrush shading in the darker areas. Contrast paints work beautifully for this. Then, I applied a wash in the recesses, trying not to stain the armor surface too much. For the edge highlights, I used Vallejo Air Silver from the old range. It's an outstanding color. Sadly, the new formula doesn't even come close. And if you're feeling fancy, you can deepen the shadows with a few subtle brush glazes. Normally, I'd stop right after the wash when painting metallic armor, but this time I wanted to show you a slightly more refined approach, worthy of this chapter. The armor's arms, black as night, represent the oblivion that falls upon the enemies of the Imperium at the hands of these paladins. No one truly knows the progenitors of this chapter, though many see in the methodical and unyielding ferocity of the Knights of Aldebaran the unmistakable traits of Dorn's sons. This chapter excels in mechanized assaults, and its arsenal holds more Terminator suits than one would expect from such a young founding. For the black details of the armor, I went for a quick and straightforward approach, a classic edge highlighting using cool tones, starting from a dark gray and building up to a much lighter gray, applied only along the sharpest edges of the armor plates. This chapter follows the Codex Astartes to the letter, as you can tell from the white helmet of this first company veteran. However, their almost fanatical adherence to the Codex doesn't stem from devotion to its principles, but rather from a strict and unyielding sense of duty and responsibility. The Knights of Aldebaran are currently engaged against the Leviathan Hive Fleet in the Segmentum Tempestus, and it is said that over half of the chapter has deployed its forces to intercept the Xenos advance. Fighting side by side with the Hawk Lords, the Knights of Aldebaran are carrying out daring boarding assaults against Tyranid bioships, teleporting entire squads of Terminators onto their living hulls, while the unmatched pilots of the Hawk Lords engage the enemy in open space. To paint the skin of this disgusting Xeno, I went for a classic layering approach. I started with vampiric flesh applied with an airbrush, because who has time for hours of thin coats, right? Then I added the signature magenta tint of this hive fleet, using a very saturated wash of volupus pink. After that, I deepened the shadows with some controlled magenta glazes, focusing on the recesses. Finally, I highlighted the skin, at first with the base color, then by mixing in a touch of ivory for the brightest spots. To make the Tyranid's innards and tongue stand out from the rest of the flesh, I gave them a more purplish hue. First, I applied 2 layers of Magos purple over the whole area to intensify and darken the base color. Then I highlighted it using the same method as the main skin, but this time I added a small amount of purple to the mix to keep that distinctive violet tone. The Tyranid ichor was probably the part I had the most fun painting on this model. I wanted an extremely vibrant color to contrast with the shiny yet restrained tones of the Terminator. My goal was to suggest a poisonous, corrosive substance, so I went for a highly saturated acid green. I started with a dark green base, then built up the highlights by gradually adding more luminous green. As always, when working with thin glazes, it helps to mix in a bit of glaze medium. In my case, I used Lamian medium. For the carapace, I started with a pure purple base, then darkened it with a wash applied over the entire surface, using a mix of Magos Purple and Black Templar. Next, I worked on the highlights, focusing mainly on the edges of the carapace, and gradually adding more and more pastel violet to the purple. Once the highlighting phase was done, I applied a thin glaze of Magos Purple to unify the tones and bring a bit more saturation and depth to the surface. Finally, time to paint the base. I'll be honest, by this point, I didn't feel like doing anything too fancy, so I just glued a photo-etched plate onto the base and painted it as if it were the wreck of some old starship. I started with a rough silver dry brush, intentionally uneven to give it a raw, worn look right from the start. Then I added some grimy oil stains using Gharagak Seewer, and after that, I thinned down some brown, orange, and red tones, mixing them directly onto the base in a totally casual, let's say anarchic way, to create a rust and oxidation effect on the metal. Don't worry if the colors look way too bright at first. Once everything dries, the final result will appear darker and more natural. The Taurus emblem is proudly displayed on the chapter's pauldrons, a clear homage to the constellation over which Aldebaran reigns as its brightest star. After almost ruining the entire project in a clumsy attempt to apply the decals, here it is at last, the finished result. I really hope this shiny Knight of Aldebaran inspires you to start your own army. And who knows, maybe one day we'll see this chapter in an official codex. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because those who don't are nothing but disgusting Xenos.